Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. A massive fire has erupted in a Hong Kong complex apartment. So far, the fire has claimed at least 44 lives and has left nearly 300 missing. The Hong Kong police has arrested 3 construction company officials. Two National Guard soldiers were shot in U.S. and critically wounded near White House. In what U.S. is calling a targeted attack, the suspect in the shooting has been identified as Rahmanullah, who is reportedly an Afghan national. Following the D.C. shooting, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that his administration would re-examine all Afghans who have entered the United States during Biden's term. Trump also denounces the shooting as a terror attack and an act of evil. Amid this escalating rift between Japan and China, U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Takaichi to avoid further escalation as per reports. This comes as U.S. aims to keep trade truce with China. British Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has announced that more than $34 billion in tax rises. This is on top of the £40 billion she raised last year. As a result, a large hit of growth of living standards is expected. People have reportedly lost their lives in a deadly train collision in China's southern province on Yunnan. At least 2 people have been injured in the collision. Floods and landslides brought about by torrential rain in Indonesia's North Sumatra province kills at least 28 people, with rescue efforts hampered by what an official described as a total cut-off of roads and communications. A bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers is urging the Trump administration to reject Myanmar's upcoming elections, calling them a sham meant to legitimize the China-backed junta amid ongoing violence and repression. Now for this hour, we start with U.S. U.S. President Donald Trump has called for a thorough review of Afghan immigrants who entered the United States during the Biden administration. This follows the shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C., which Trump has described as an act of terror. Let's listen into what he has said.
Animal who perpetrated this atrocity pays the steepest possible price. I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth. He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about, by people who shouldn't even be in our country. We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden, and we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here or add benefit to our country. If they can't love our country, we don't want them.
In response to the shooting, the U.S. government will deploy an additional 500 troops to Washington, D.C. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has emphasized that the move aims to ensure the safety and security of the capital, reinforcing the resolve to maintain safety in the city. Let's listen in.
That will only stiffen our resolve. We will never back down. We will secure our capital. We will secure our cities. In fact, this happened just steps away from the White House. It will not stand. And that's why President Trump has asked me, and I will ask the Secretary of the Army, to the National Guard, to add 500 additional troops, National Guardsmen, to Washington, D.C. This will only stiffen our resolve to ensure that we make Washington, D.C. safe.
While FBI Director Kash Patel has confirmed that the 2 troops were attacked in a horrendous act of violence, but clarified that earlier reports mistakenly stated they had died. Let's listen into what he has said.
D.C., where two of our brave members of the National Guard and the Department of War were brazenly attacked in a horrendous act of violence. They were shot. They're in critical condition.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Matthew Vadam. He's an American journalist and author, joins us live from Washington. Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hi.
Sure.
Thank you. Matthew, what more can you tell us about this ongoing and unfolding incident in Washington?
Well, at somewhere around 2 o'clock this afternoon, a man walked up to a male and a female National Guardsman from West Virginia and shot them. And initially, there were reports that the two National Guardsmen from West Virginia had died, but those reports were false and were quickly retracted. And right now, the authorities are trying to figure out the motive for the attack. But since the person is from Afghanistan and was admitted to the United States in 2021 under the Biden administration as part of a welcome program for Afghan people from Afghanistan, the suspicion is that this person was committing an act of jihad. In other words, was a Muslim, committed an act of Muslim Islamic terrorism. And, you know, we don't know if that's true yet, but that's a logical enough assumption considering that the person came from Afghanistan. There was a report, I'm not sure if it was corroborated, that the man shouted Allahu Akbar before he opened fire on the two soldiers, which, you know, is often what precedes an Islamic terrorist attack, as people in India well know.
Right.
They shout, "God is the greatest," and then they kill people. And God is the greatest, Allahu Akbar, in Arabic, that is. And so that is the suspicion. I don't know if it's true, but it is certainly logical enough that, you know, why, unless the man is just a crazy person and he decided he wanted to shoot two National Guardsmen. But, you know, a National Guardsman is a symbol of the authority of the government, and so would be a logical enough person to attack if you are an Islamic terrorist. So we'll have to wait as the investigation unfolds to find out what actually happens if that person's motivation can be determined. He was reportedly about, you know, 30 years old, not an old man, and he was apparently shot in the encounter, but has survived. I don't think that he is in critical condition, I'm not certain, but I know that the two National Guardsmen, the two soldiers from West Virginia, are reportedly in hospital in critical condition. And so everyone is hoping that they survive. President Trump has reacted very strongly to it and said that the perpetrator of the attack is going to you know, be punished for carrying it out. And as a result, within hours, U.S. policy towards nationals of Afghanistan was quickly changed, and they have suspended all immigration applications to, including asylum applications from Afghan nationals to the United States. And I wouldn't be surprised if more changes are made. Afghanistan nationals who were admitted to the United States under the 2021 program, I believe that was under an immigration program called parole. They were granted entry into the United States without any conditions, but also without any expectations that they would be given permanent resident status or citizenship in the United States. I don't believe it's what you call TPS, temporary protected status, which is granted to people from certain countries that are experiencing civil disorder or, earthquakes or fires or crime waves or what have you. President Trump has been revoking the temporary protected status of nationals of certain countries, and I wouldn't be surprised if he takes away whatever status Afghan nationals have as a result of this attack. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Matthew Adams for sharing that insight from U.S. Of course, that it is, of course, the Allahu Akbar part we are not sure about yet, and there is suspicion of radicalization of Islam. Thank you very much. Moving on to Asia, the president of Taiwan has sent condolences to Hong Kong following the deadly fire in the Taipo district. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has also expressed his condolences over the tragedy, which claimed at least 44 lives, with nearly 300 people still missing. She has called on Hong Kong authorities to make every effort to contain the blaze and minimize further casualties. Hong Kong police have arrested 3 men in connection with the fire, suspecting that foam materials used during renovations may have contributed to the fire's rapid spread. Hong Kong's chief executive, John Lee, has expressed deep sorrow over the tragedy, paying tribute to the firefighter who lost his life, as well as to the others who bravely responded. Lee has vowed that efforts would continue to rescue those still trapped and provide support to the affected families. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Colin Chong-Yu Keat. He's a Foreign Affairs Security and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from University of Malaya from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, what political implications or might arise from the arrests of these company directors, and how do such accountability measures influence public trust in governance and regulation in Hong Kong now?
Yeah, we have seen how the level of public anger and of course the call for greater accountability and reforms in terms of safety measures. We have seen how this blaze is now the biggest, the worst in Hong Kong's history, and of course it came just days before the territory's legislative elections scheduled in early next month. So this has raised pressure on the administration, on John Lee's administration, for competence, for the level of preparedness, and the complacency in terms of the safeguarding citizens' lives. We have seen how the materials being used and the history of using bamboo scaffolding have also contributed to this deadly blaze, and the level of shock, public anger have also mounted, and of course this will also have a greater impact on the state of the local elections, and of course also there have been calls from experts and residents as well as the public for an end to this long-held practice of these flammable materials being used, and of course the call for stricter building and renovation regulations, and of course this has been a timely wake-up call to the government, to the local administration, and of course the pressure now is on John Lee's administration to launch a full-scale criminal investigation and safety investigation into the fire, but this, for the time being, I will argue that we will not be enough or sufficient to satisfy the public demand or the public call for accountability. And critics have long argued that there has to be a swift policy change in terms of not only cosmetic changes, but a deep reforms in terms of public safety and the competency of the public officials in ensuring that this will not happen again in the future.
Yes. With that, I would like to thank Professor Collins for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now, we stay in this news. Meanwhile, residents of Hong Kong have described the scene as heart-wrenching and shocking as families search for loved ones and crews continue rescue efforts. Local volunteers have opened an emergency shelter to support displaced residents, offering food, blankets, and a place to rest. One resident summed up the grief felt across the community, saying it's truly heartbreaking. Let's listen into what some of the residents have shared.
其實我真係都覺得幾恐怖嘅，即係你其實我應該算係睇住佢從一棟變成2棟，之後而家好似3棟，即係而家好似就都4棟啦。咁即係其實真係幾恐怖下嘅。
個心情係好唔舒服，係好揦住，即係好似即係如果嗰啲網係防火嘅話，就唔會發生呢個情。
你諗下一個屋企冇咗喎，燒毀喎，換轉邊個都心急啦，係咪啊？感同身受啦，真係好難受㗎。其實係個屋企啊咁樣燒咗佢喎，真係形容唔到咯。我諗香港可能開埠以嚟都未試過呢啲咁嘅火喎，呢一下子咁多棟都燒都着晒喎，一下咁樣2棟、3棟、4棟咁全部着晒喎，係咪啊？都好震驚啊！
無論係細節上面啊，即係可能係一啲市民安置啦，或者係究竟係原因係咩咧？我諗可能大家最想知係原因係咩咯，即係呢啲我覺得
傷痛減少啲咯。
係啊，即係解釋得好啲咯，係啊，即係唔好草草了事，因為始終呢度牽涉嘅唔係1、2個單位咁簡單，係一條村，差唔多一條村咁樣。
Now we move on to our next news. Tensions are rising between Washington and Pretoria. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that South Africa will not be invited to next year's G20 summit in Miami. His announcement comes after the United States boycotted last week's G20 leaders meeting in Johannesburg. Trump has accused South Africa of weaponizing its G20 presidency and refusing to hand over leadership at the summit's closing ceremony. He has said that decision led him to block South Africa from the 2026 guest list. Trump has also repeated claims of persecution of white South Africans, allegations widely dismissed by experts and human rights groups. However, South Africa's presidency has not yet commented on this issue. Now we welcome back Professor Collins Choying-Yu Keat. He is Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now looking at this, thank you. How might the U.S. decision to exclude South Africa from the next G20 summit affect the upcoming G20 and also the global perceptions of neutrality of G20, especially when political narratives such as claims of persecution that are rejected by experts shape such international relations?
Well, this is a tit-for-tat move. We have seen how the U.S. has boycotted the summit in Johannesburg this year, and of course accusing the South Africa of refusing to hand over the hosting protocol to the U.S. During the summit. So all this has also contributed to this sense of tension between both countries. And of course, South Africa has been the voice of the global South. And of course, Trump being Trump, nations have been well aware of the need to expect this kind of responses from Trump. And the implications for global diplomacy, international order will not be, as much as, to be pervasive. We have seen how these strained U.S.-South Africa relations, are now being confined, largely to these two nations. And of course, also the G20 has long been premised on the substance of inclusion and consensus. So this exclusion of South Africa for next year's summit in Florida, of course, is based on the decision and in the policy of Trump and Washington, but it might necessarily undermine the credibility of or the intent of other G20 nations to work alongside with the U.S. Of course, they are well aware of the repercussions if they do not, position themselves in alignment with the greater interests of the U.S. and of the G20 platform as a whole. So I don't see that to be affecting the credibility or the impact of G20 as a whole. And the other nations are very much in need of the impact of Trump's policies on G20, and that this is an enclosed kind of tension and issue. But of course, there will be some backlash against perceived U.S. unilateral move to sidestep South Africa. But other nations would have expected that, and this is also being seen as a warning sign, as a warning by Trump that other nations will need to treat the U.S. with respect, and of course also the international order and the impact and influence of G20 will only be enhanced and amplified by the inclusion or by the impact and direct involvement of the US under Trump. So I think this is a core message being sent by Trump that the G20 will not go forward without the proper and direct support from the US, as with the case of also G7 and as well as the UN platform as a whole. So I think it's a very strategic and move by Trump in this measure.
Right, and what do you think, to what extent should individual member states, even if it's a major country like US, be allowed to interpret or deviate from established G20 protocols?
Well, we have seen, it is inevitable for, other nations, whether they are in G20 or the UN or G7, to not disregard the important aspect of the support and the impact of Trump's policies on these measures. So regardless of the internal mechanisms or norms of institutions, including the G20, the direct deterrence effect, the direct economic measures and impact from Trump's policies will pervade, will supersede the importance of the returns or the positive impact from this institution, including the G20. So I think this has been the realization being realized by not only the G20 members, but also the G7 members, also the European members, as well as ASEAN members. So we have seen how this projection and the trend of nations getting more compelled to align deeper with U.S. interests, especially under the worldview of Trump, the lenses of Trump in terms of global policies, have been one of the core main essence of the moves by other nations now. So I don't see that other G20 states will protest vehemently or to strongly protest against Trump's move to exclude South Africa, because they know themselves well that this move will invite further repercussions and that it will not serve the greater interests of that particular individual nation as well as the interests of G20 as a whole. So yes, this new model of norms have now been dictated by Trump. I think it is good for Washington to double down on the need for the US also to play a greater role in terms of also providing these needed economic and security measures for all G20 nations as well as for other nations in other institutions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for highlighting that. And with that, I would like to thank Professor Collins for joining us today from Kuala Lumpur and sharing that insight. Now we move on to UK. British Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has announced a big tax-raising budget that will take more money from workers' people saving for a pension and investors to give herself a greater room to meet her deficit reduction targets. Britain's fiscal watchdog cut its forecasts for economic growth for the coming years as a setback for struggling Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who promised voters last year that he would speed up the economy. Meanwhile, the Office for the Budget Responsibility, OBR, has said that the government will now have more than double its previous buffer for meeting these fiscal targets, something which is closely watched by investors assessing Britain's borrowing risks. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Matthew Adam. He's an American journalist and author, joins us live from Washington. Thank you very much, Matthew, for staying with us. Now, we move on to our next news now. Now moving on to Asia, a rare tropical cyclone blew across Indonesia's Sumatra Island, inundating the nearby Malacca Strait and causing floods and landslides. At least 28 people have been killed in the region so far. Reports suggest that more than 10 people are still missing following the disaster. An official has said that rescue efforts have been hampered as there are a total cut-off of roads and communications. Up to 8,000 people across North Sumatra has been evacuated, with aid and logistics now being distributed via helicopter as per reports. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.